I stood in the middle of the kitchen, clutching a pink bow in my hand. It was small, silky, with a faint shimmer, but it felt like a grenade ready to explode. I found it in the pocket of his jacket, the one he never let me wash, always taking it to the dry cleaner himself. My fingers trembled as I held the bow up to the light. It wasn't mine. It reeked of sweet, unfamiliar perfume, a scent that didn't belong to our life. I knew his smells, the cologne he wore every morning, the coffee he drank before work, even the sweat after the gym. But this was something else. Something that didn't belong. The key turned in the lock. The door slammed, he was home. My stomach twisted, but I didn't hide the bow. I stood there, gripping it in my fist, as he walked into the kitchen, tossing his backpack onto a chair. His eyes met mine, and for a moment, I saw a shadow flicker in his gaze before he plastered on his usual smile. "What's with the face?" he joked, opening the fridge. I didn't answer. My hand, clutching the bow, burned. I could have said everything right then, screamed, thrown the scrap of fabric in his face. But something stopped me. This bow wasn't just a thing. It was proof. Proof of something I couldn't yet name but already felt, like a cold knife in my chest. I remembered his recent late nights, how he hid his phone when I entered the room, how his stories about meetings sounded less convincing. My imagination painted pictures that made me want to scream, but I forced myself to breathe. Not now. Not like this. He poured himself water, muttering about a tough day, and I watched him as if seeing him for the first time. His movements, his voice, everything felt foreign. The bow in my hand was the key to a truth I didn't yet know but had to uncover. I slipped it into my pocket as he turned his back. "Everything okay?" he asked, and I nodded, smiling. But inside, I was no longer the person I was yesterday. This moment changed everything. I couldn't go back to blind trust, to our evenings with wine and talks about the future. The bow was the first piece of a puzzle, and I knew I'd find the rest. I wouldn't make a scene. I wouldn't cry in front of him. I'd find the truth, whatever it was. And I'd do it quietly, coldly, like a predator stalking its prey. The door closed behind him as he went to shower, and I stood in the kitchen, clutching the bow. The game had begun. I knew his routine like my own heartbeat. Work from 9 to 6, gym until 8, home by 9. He was predictable as a clock. But the last 2 months, something shifted. He started staying late. Meetings, he'd say, avoiding my gaze. Presentations, clients, you know how it is. But I didn't know. His voice sounded different, too even, too rehearsed. I noticed little things. How he hid his phone when I walked in. How his fingers quickly tapped the screen to close a message. Once, I saw him smile at something on his phone, but when I asked what was funny, he shrugged, a meme in a chat. I didn't believe him. His eyes avoided mine when I asked about his day. And then there was the bow. Pink, foreign, with the scent of perfume that wasn't mine. I couldn't shake the thought that it wasn't an accident. It was a clue. A clue to betrayal. I started replaying every moment of our life. Were there other signs? Had I missed something earlier? I remembered how he began showering right after coming home. How his clothes always smelled fresh, as if he was washing something off himself. My thoughts buzzed like a swarm of bees. I couldn't sleep, lying next to him, feeling he was no longer mine. Every smile, every touch felt fake. But I had no proof. Just the bow. Just a feeling. So, I decided to watch. No hysterics, no shouting, no demanding explanations. That would be too easy for him. If he was lying, I'd find the truth myself. I'd become a shadow that sees everything. I started noticing details, when he left, when he returned, what he said. I checked his pockets while he slept, though it made my heart pound. I didn't want to believe he was capable of betrayal, but the bow in my drawer whispered, "You know it's true." I bought a small notebook and began writing. Dates, times, his excuses. Every inconsistency, every pause in his words. I didn't know where it would lead, but I knew one thing: I wouldn't stop until I knew everything. I wouldn't be the victim crying into a pillow. I'd be the one who unraveled this lie, thread by thread. The bow lay in my drawer as a reminder. It was my first proof, but not my last. I felt something new awakening in me, not pain, but a cold, sharp resolve. I'd find out who was behind this bow. And I'd make him regret it. I started checking his things, but found nothing. His wallet, backpack, even the drawers in his desk, everything was clean. No receipts, no notes, no other bows. His phone was locked with a new password I didn't know. It only fueled my suspicion. If he was innocent, why such caution? I spent hours in the dark, replaying his every move, every glance. But there was no evidence. Just the pink bow I kept hidden and the scent of foreign perfume I still smelled when I closed my eyes. I felt powerless, but I couldn't stop. My obsession grew with each day. I couldn't live without knowing the truth. So, I went further. I installed a tracking app on his phone. It was simple. I waited until he was asleep and synced his device with mine. My fingers shook as I set it up, but I didn't stop. The first week yielded nothing. His routes were familiar: office, gym, home. I started doubting myself. Maybe I imagined it all? Maybe the bow was just a coincidence. But one evening, he said he was going to a corporate event. "I'll be late, don't wait up," he said, kissing my forehead. His lips were cold. I smiled, nodded, but as soon as he left, I opened the app. The dot on the map didn't move to a restaurant where the event was supposed to be. It stopped in a quiet residential area outside the city. I sat, staring at the screen, feeling blood pound in my temples. This wasn't a restaurant. It was a house. I knew that area: wealthy people lived there, quiet streets, neat lawns. What was he doing there? I tried to find a logical explanation, maybe a client's house. But why lie about a corporate event? My fingers gripped the phone so tightly my knuckles whitened. I wanted to call him, scream everything, but I forced myself to breathe. I wrote the address in my notebook. Every detail mattered. I didn't know what to do next, but I knew I wouldn't stop. The dot stayed there until midnight. He came home at 1, smelling not of wine, like at corporate events, but of that same sweet scent from the bow. "How was the event?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "Boring," he replied, not looking at me. I smiled. He didn't know I saw his lie. He didn't know I was one step closer to the truth. I went to bed but didn't sleep. My mind worked like a machine, planning the next move. The bow in my drawer waited for its kin, other evidence I'd find. I couldn't sit idle, but I knew a direct attack would get me nowhere. If I went to that house now, made a scene, he'd deny everything. I needed evidence he couldn't dismiss. So, I acted carefully. The next evening, when he said he'd stay late at work, I got in my car and followed him. I stayed far back, hiding behind other cars, like in a bad detective movie. My heart pounded, but I forced myself to breathe evenly. He stopped at the same house. I parked a block away, in the shadow of trees, so no one would see me. His car was by the gate, and he quickly went inside. I waited, gripping the steering wheel, until I saw a woman's silhouette in the window. Slender, graceful, with long hair. She moved through the room like she was dancing. My stomach twisted. This wasn't a coincidence. This was her. I couldn't barge in, but I could gather more. So, I took out my phone and photographed his car. Then I noticed another car parked nearby, a silver sedan with a shiny license plate. I photographed that too. The plates could be a lead. I sat in my car for another hour, watching. The light in the window went out, but he didn't come out. I drove home, feeling anger mixed with cold resolve. The next day, I sent the photos to a friend who had access to a database through her job at an insurance company. I need to know whose car this is, I said, avoiding details. She didn't ask. 2 days later, I had a name, Alina Kravitz, 29, interior designer. I Googled her. Her social media profile was open, smiling, stylish, with the same long curls I saw in the window. In one photo, she wore a pink scarf with a small bow at the end. My fingers trembled. I returned to my notebook, writing everything: the address, the name, the car's plate number. Each detail was a brick in my wall of evidence. I couldn't stop, even if I wanted to. My obsession grew, but now it was controlled. I didn't cry, didn't panic. I acted. When he came home that evening, I noticed him check his phone before setting it on the table. "Long day at work?" I asked, keeping my voice soft. "Yeah, presentation ran late," he said, not looking at me. I smiled. He didn't know I saw his car at Alina's house. He didn't know I knew her name. I went to bed, keeping my notebook under my pillow. My plan was getting clearer. I wasn't just seeking the truth, I was preparing for war. He started acting differently, but it wasn't remorse. He brought me flowers for no reason, roses, which I hated, but he didn't notice. His smile was forced, like a mask he put on before stepping onto a stage. "You know I love you," he said, hugging me, but his hands were cold. I felt it was a performance. He was trying to soothe me, to lull my vigilance. But I was no longer the one who believed words. I started asking questions, but carefully. "How was your day? Who'd you meet?" I watched his reactions, every pause, every flicker of his eyes. His answers grew shorter, his pauses longer. Once, I mentioned the neighborhood where Alina's house was. "Were you near the park today?" "Nice houses there," I said casually. He abruptly changed the subject, asking what was for dinner. His fingers gripped his fork tighter than necessary. I noted it in my notebook. So, I dug deeper. I started noticing his clothes, his smells. One evening, I realized his shirt didn't smell of his cologne but of something sweet, the same scent as the bow. I said nothing but checked his jacket. In the pocket was a receipt from a cafe we never visited together. The date was the same evening he was supposedly at a meeting. I hid the receipt in my notebook. His behavior grew more nervous. He checked his phone when he thought I wasn't looking. Once, I walked in while he was texting. He quickly closed the screen and smiled. "Work." I nodded, but my mind recorded everything. I knew he was hiding more than just messages. My suspicions were no longer guesses, they were growing evidence, like a snowball. I noticed he avoided serious conversations. When I tried to talk about our future, he joked or changed the subject. "Not now, I'm tired," he'd say, but his eyes betrayed fear. He was scared I knew something. And he was right. I knew more than he could imagine. Every lie he told made me stronger. I no longer felt like a victim waiting for explanations. I was a hunter following a trail. My notebook thickened, dates, addresses, receipts, smells. I didn't rush. I knew the truth was a puzzle, and I'd complete it. That evening, when he brought flowers again, I looked at him and thought, "You don't know yet, but I'm already winning." I smiled, accepting the bouquet. My war was quiet, but it had begun. I knew the truth was in his phone, but he'd changed the password, and I couldn't crack it. I tried guessing, birthdays, anniversaries, random combinations, but nothing worked. His caution only confirmed my suspicions. An innocent person doesn't guard their phone so carefully. I spent hours thinking how to access his messages, but the direct route was blocked. So, I turned to his laptop. He left it at home when he went to work, and I knew he wasn't as careful with passwords there. One evening, while he was at the gym, I turned it on. The password was old, the one he used for everything. I opened the browser and checked the search history. What I saw made my heart skip a beat, how to permanently delete messages, how to clear chat history, can messengers be tracked? He was covering his tracks. I knew he wasn't as smart as he thought. So, I installed a program to recover deleted files. It took all night, but I didn't sleep. My eyes burned from the screen's light, but I couldn't stop. I found a cache from his messenger. The messages were deleted, but the program recovered fragments. "You're my only one," he wrote to someone. The name, Alina. Not mine. I took screenshots, saving every piece. Each message was a blow, but I didn't cry. I felt anger turn into something cold and sharp, like a blade. I found another message, "We'll meet tomorrow, she doesn't know anything." She was me. I sat in the dark, staring at the screen, feeling a new strength awaken in me. He thought I was blind. He was wrong. The next day, I acted like nothing happened. I made breakfast, smiled as he talked about work. But my thoughts were elsewhere. I knew the name, Alina. I knew he was lying. But it wasn't enough. I needed evidence he couldn't deny. I returned to the laptop, checking his email, cloud storage, even the recycle bin. I found a photo, him and her, smiling, in a cafe. Her hair was tied with a pink bow. I saved everything. My notebook couldn't hold more notes, so I created a folder on my computer, password protected. Every detail, every screenshot, every receipt. I didn't know how I'd use it, but I knew I'd be ready. That evening, when he came home, I noticed him check the laptop, as if sensing something was off. I smiled, serving him dinner. He didn't know I was deep in his secrets. My war was silent, but I was winning every battle. I wanted to confront him, but every time I tried, he dodged. "You're paranoid again," he'd snap when I asked why he was home so late. His words were like a slap, but I didn't react. I knew a fight would only give him the upper hand. He wanted me to explode, to become irrational, so he could blame me. But I didn't give him that. So, I reached out to a friend who worked at a detective agency. I didn't want to involve her, but I needed help. "I need to know who he's spending time with," I said, handing her the house's address and Alina's photo. She didn't ask questions. "Give me a week," she said. I waited, continuing to watch him. He grew more nervous, checking his phone even while we watched a movie. A week later, my friend sent a report. Alina Kravitz, 29, designer, lived in that house. They'd been meeting for at least 3 months. The report included photos, him and Alina leaving a cafe, holding hands. Her hair was tied with a pink bow. I looked at the photos, and my anger turned into something else, cold, controlled rage. I didn't cry. I acted. I added the report to my folder. I had screenshots, receipts, photos, now a professional report. But I knew it wasn't enough. I needed a blow he couldn't deflect. I started thinking how to use this evidence, how to make him pay for every lie. I didn't rush. Every detail mattered. He kept playing his role. Brought coffee to bed, told jokes, but his eyes betrayed fear. He sensed I knew something but couldn't figure out what. I played along, smiled, cooked dinner. But my thoughts were on my plan. I knew the truth was my weapon, and I'd use it at the right moment. That evening, when he said he'd stay late again, I didn't check the app. I knew where he was going. Instead, I opened the report and reread every word. Alina wasn't just his mistress, she was part of his double life. I wondered if she knew about me. Was he lying to her too? I noted this in my notebook. My war wasn't just with him. It was with all his lies. I went to bed, keeping my notebook under my pillow. Tomorrow, I'd take the next step. I gathered all the evidence, the bow, screenshots, photos, report, but I didn't show him. I knew a simple fight wouldn't change anything. He'd deny, lie, maybe even blame me. I needed a plan that would shatter his world as he'd shattered mine. So, I decided to act strategically. I wouldn't be the victim who screams and cries. I'd be the one controlling the game. I started preparing. First, I protected myself. I opened a separate bank account and transferred half our savings there. I did it carefully, in small amounts, so he wouldn't notice. I changed the passwords on all my accounts, email, social media, even the cloud where I stored the evidence. I no longer trusted him. Every move he made could be part of his game. Then I contacted a lawyer. I didn't want a divorce right away, but I wanted to be ready. The woman on the other end of the phone was calm and professional. "Bring all the documents you have," she said. I gathered everything: bank statements, joint contracts, even copies of his messages. I didn't know how I'd use them, but I knew I'd be prepared. He kept lying. His stories grew more convoluted. One evening, he said he was going to a seminar out of town, but I knew it was Alina. I didn't argue. I smiled and wished him a good trip. When he left, I opened my folder of evidence and reviewed it again. Every screenshot, every receipt, every photo. My rage was cold as ice. I didn't rush. I waited for the perfect moment. I started thinking about Alina. Did she know about me? Was she as much a victim of his lies as I was? I opened her social media profile and scrolled through her photos. She looked happy, confident. In one photo, she stood by his car, smiling. My stomach twisted, but I didn't look away. She was part of this, knowingly or not. I wrote down her number from the detective's report. I didn't know how I'd use it, but I kept all my cards close. That evening, I sat in silence, holding the bow in my hand. It was my first piece of evidence, my first step toward the truth. Now I had an army of proof, and I was ready for war. I didn't cry, didn't panic. I planned. My notebook lay on the table, full of notes. My computer folder was password protected. My savings were safe. I was ready. He thought I knew nothing. But I knew everything. And soon, he'd find out. I was no longer a victim. Every lie he told, every piece of evidence I found, made me stronger. I stopped fearing the truth. It was my weapon, my shield. I looked at him when he came home and saw not the man I loved but an enemy I'd outplay. My rage was no longer hot, it was cold, like steel. I knew I'd win because I was acting smart. I kept preparing. My savings were secure, my accounts protected. I met with the lawyer again, and she helped me make a plan. "If you want a divorce, we can make him pay," she said, reviewing my evidence. I nodded. Divorce was only part of it. I wanted him to feel what I felt when I found that bow. I started changing myself. I signed up for self-defense classes to feel control over my body. I updated my wardrobe, getting rid of old clothes that reminded me of him. I even changed my hairstyle, short bob instead of the long curls he loved. I didn't do it for him. I did it for me. Every step was part of my transformation. I was no longer the one who waits, hopes, believes. I was the one who acts. My thoughts became clear as glass. I knew I didn't just want to expose him. I wanted him to pay for every lie, every night I lay in bed feeling betrayed. I started planning the final blow. I knew he wasn't expecting it. He thought I was still the naive woman who believed his words. But I was different. I contacted my friend at the detective agency again. "I need a recording," I said. I knew he met Alina every Wednesday. My friend agreed to help. She placed a device in his car, and a week later, I had an audio of their conversation. "She doesn't suspect a thing," he laughed, talking about me. Alina laughed with him. My stomach twisted, but I didn't stop. I saved the recording. Every action made me stronger. I no longer feared loneliness or the future. I knew I'd manage. My notebook lay on the table, my evidence ready. I looked in the mirror and saw not a victim but a warrior. I was ready for the end. He thought he was in control, but he was wrong. I held all the cards, and I'd play them at the right moment. My transformation was complete. I was no longer the one who cries over a bow. I was the one who'd untie it for good. I chose an evening when he came home early. He walked into the kitchen, tossed his backpack on a chair, as usual. But this time, the pink bow lay on the table. Next to it, a folder. I sat at the table, holding a cup of tea, and looked at him. His eyes locked on the bow, and I saw his face change. "What's this?" he asked, trying to sound casual. I smiled. "Open the folder," I said. He hesitated but took it. Inside were my evidence, screenshots of his messages, photos with Alina, the detective's report, the cafe receipt, even a USB drive with their recorded conversation. I saw his fingers tremble as he flipped through the pages. "You have 1 hour to pack," I said, keeping my voice steady. He tried to say something, but I raised my hand. "Don't lie. I know everything." He tried to explain, muttering about a mistake, that it didn't mean anything. But I didn't listen. I looked at him like a stranger. Every word was empty, like his promises. I stood, walked to the door, and opened it. "Time's ticking," I said. He stood, clutching the folder, and I saw his world collapse. When he went to pack, I sat at the table and opened my laptop. I sent a copy of the evidence to Alina with a short message: "He was lying to you too." I knew she'd read it. I knew she'd hear the recording where he laughed, saying, "She doesn't suspect a thing." I didn't want her pain, but I wanted the truth. For everyone. He left with a bag in 40 minutes. "We can talk," he said, standing in the doorway. I looked at him and smiled. We already did. The door closed behind him, and I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. I was free. The next day, I filed for divorce. My lawyer was ready, the papers signed. I knew he couldn't contest my terms, not with my evidence. I sold our apartment and moved to a new one, small but mine. I started a new life, where there was no room for lies. The bow stayed in a box with my notebook. I didn't throw it out. It was a reminder of who I was and who I became. I unraveled his betrayal, thread by thread, and came out of this war stronger. Alina wrote me a week later, thanking me for the truth. She left him too. I didn't reply. My battle was over. I sat in my new apartment, holding a cup of coffee, looking out the window. The sun was setting, and I knew a new day was ahead. My day. I was no longer a victim. I was myself. And that was enough.